Okay, Cardinals, if you would like to do a bit of sewing with our brand new sewing machines, then you have to go through this quick tutorial with me. First of all, your sewing machine's power switch is right here on the side. This is your power cord. You need to make sure it's all the way in. It has two pieces. One is actually your power source that goes over to the power block on the left. The other one plugs into the foot pedal, which goes on the floor, and that is how you get your sewing machine to sew. When you turn on your sewing machine, the light's going to come on in the area where you are sewing, and that'll make it easier to see what you're doing. You have a lot of different settings that you can change on your sewing machine. So let's go through the basics. This one right here, this is your stitch type. We're going to keep it on this plain stitch most of the time, but there are other options. And if you want to get into those, we can do it a bit later. This is the length of your stitch. We're going to leave it on 3 most of the time, but you can make your stitches itty bitty, or you can make them much longer. Up here you have the stitch width. So if you're doing a zigzag stitch, which is exactly what it sounds like, you can make them wider or you can make them narrower. This one is the setting for your needle's position. We typically leave it right in the center, but it can actually move a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right. This one we're not going to touch at all. It's the tension setting. We're going to keep that on 4 because that is the way that works best for us. All right. This is your reverse button. We'll talk about that shortly. And over here on the side, this wheel, that's going to raise and lower your needle. So if you look in over here, you can see it moving up and down, okay? And that's an important piece for us to know about. I will do a separate video later on how to thread the machine, but the important stuff to start with is that this handle's going to be up, and in behind here, you have your thread, and it is feeding through a number of different places. See, they're all numbered here, and you follow this path and down into the needle on the bottom. There's also another bit of thread down here in the bottom in what's called a bobbin, and so you'll have 2 pieces of thread coming out of the side of your machine here when you sew. All right, let's do a little bit of basic sewing. When you're ready to sew, whatever fabric you're going to use, you want to set it up so that it goes between this piece, it's called the foot, and these little teeth that are down in underneath, and that'll help the material feed through. But this piece, the foot, has to be lowered down on top of your fabric. Now, in order to do that, let me just raise it back up and I'll turn the machine and show you. There is a little lever here on the back, and you just lower it down and then bring it up when you're ready to bring it up, okay? So I'll turn this back to where it is, and I'm gonna make sure my needle is all the way up, so I'm gonna use my hand wheel to lift it up a little bit, and I'm gonna put my piece of fabric in here. I'm gonna use the lever to lower the foot. I've got my foot pedal down on the floor, and when I'm ready, I'll gently press down on that in order to get the machine to start sewing. I want to make sure my fingers never go in here underneath that needle because the sewing machine can sew through your hand. So make sure your hands are out of the way. And the machine will pull the fabric on its own. You don't actually have to do that. So I'll lower my foot and see how it goes. It sews right on through. When I'm ready to stop sewing, all that I do is I lift the lever that lifts the foot, and I'm going to pull this out. See how the thread is still attached? There's a little cutter over here on the side, and I'm just going to come up and pop through there to cut it off. And we have a little bit of basic sewing. So we want to make sure of a couple of safety things when we start to sew. When you set your fabric up, you know you need to stay away from the needle because it will totally sew through your hand if you don't. When I reach behind to lower the foot, I can either do it this way or this way, but I want to make sure my hands are well out of the way. Look what happens when I lower the needle all the way down. I'm just using my hand wheel to do that. When it's all the way down, this little screw right here will be very close to your fingers, and it'll hit them if you're in too close, and that's pretty painful. So you want to make sure your fingers are well away from that. And when I use my foot pedal to start to sew, I want to try to go slowly. Sometimes you'll get the wrong pressure and you'll go too fast. Keep my hand away, and if I take my hands off, the machine will actually move the fabric for me. See how it's feeding through? That's because there's teeth underneath that help it to move. And when I'm done, I just make sure to lift my needle all the way up, and look, you'll see this metal piece right here lifts all the way to the top. Lift up the foot, and then you're gonna pull this out gently. And like I said, if it doesn't pull out gently, it's easy to pull, then you need to finish raising this up all the way. Okay, and I snip my threads and away you go. Now, one more thing before you start to sew. Once you've done a little bit of practice like this and you've gotten a few straight lines, and don't worry if they're not perfectly straight in the beginning, then you need to know how to start and finish. Because if we just start like this, then when we go to pull on the thread, it can come out. And, you know, things do get pulled on as you are sewing. So when I go and I put the foot down this time, I'm going to use my reverse button a little bit. So I'm going to sew 2 or 3 stitches, just a couple. Then I'm going to press down on this, and that makes the sewing machine go in the other direction. So you'll see my fabric went this way this time. And then I let go of the reverse, and I can go ahead and sew my line. And when I'm ready to stop, I'm going to press down on the reverse again and do a couple of stitches backwards, and then maybe 1 or 2 forwards, because, you know, I like to be sure. And then I'm ready to make sure my foot is up all the way, or sorry, my needle's up all the way, and then lift my foot up all the way, and you can pull this out and cut it off. All right, we're gonna go over how to thread the machine. If you're not really comfortable doing this, you can grab me and I'll give you a hand with it. Every machine threads a little bit differently. Mine does not thread like this at home, but this one isn't too bad once you get the hang of it. So to thread your machine, you need a spool of thread. You need this little cap piece that holds the spool on that little stick back here, see that? And you're gonna need a bobbin with some thread on it. So we'll do the thread first. So I'm going to take my roll of thread and I'm going to put it onto this little piece. I'm going to make sure it's coming towards me over the top. Sorry, it's hard to see here. See how it's coming towards me? And then I'm going to put this little piece over it to hold it in place. Now, the rest of the thing, you're going to follow the numbered steps. So you can see there's a number 1 here, a number 2 here. Then when you come back here, you have 3, 4, 5 is up on top, and 6 is down here, and the last step is the needle in through the needle. So let's hopefully show it to you. All right, we've got the thread on the piece, and it is feeding towards me, coming this way, okay, coming this way. And the first thing, oops, the handle's got to stay out of my way, hey? First thing I want to do is put it into this number 1. There's a little hook. You got to snap it underneath and get it to click into place. And then you want to go into number 2 right here. Now, after that, we are following the numbers. So I'm going to go down to number 3 right here. For number 3, you're following this channel all the way down, and then number 4 wraps around the bottom of the channel and goes back up to the top. For number 5, you want to make sure this metal piece is all the way up. Remember, it raises and lowers with your hand wheel. And you want to clip it in through that little piece. There's a tiny little loop you have to get into. See the little, whoops, my fingers are huge. See the little loophole in there? When I give it a tug, it pops right into that. Now, after you get it in through the little loop here, you're going to feed it down through this channel, down past number 6. And there is another little piece down here that you have to get it in through. And it's a very difficult piece for me to show you because it's very, very low down, but we'll try. All right, this is going to be awkward to see, but I will point it out to you. So when you go down here, you're going to look up underneath, and there's this little metal loop. There's a little spot in there, so you want your thread to come in, go around, and come back out through that little gap that's in the back. All right, final step is down here where you're going to use, there's a little tiny white switch almost back here that you're going to pull down, and this is your automatic needle threader. You can just thread the needle by finding the gap and putting the thread through, but the automatic needle threader is there for you to use. So filming the automatic needle threader is really not working very well, but I'll give it a shot for you. So when you lower this little white tab, you want to swivel this in so it's right next to the needle, and there is a tiny little hook that actually has to go through the eye of the needle. And if you don't get that, this won't work. So you're going to thread here on the left, okay, through that little hook. And then over here on the right, you want to go through with a tiny hook there. And if you get it in the right spot, the little hook should pull it right through the needle. And then you can just let it go back up and see the loop it pulls out. You grab a hold of that and you carefully pull the rest of the way through, and that's your top piece threaded. The last part of threading your machine is to drop the bobbin in the casing. So you want to set yourself up with your thread going to the right, and your bobbin just gets dropped right into here. See this little metal piece that's like a little cutout? You want to slide your thread along so it catches there, and then feed it to the back. And then you just take your little cover put it into place. Whoops, put it into place and snap it down.